Alright guys, hey, it's Biff. It's been a long time since we've put out a video for you for Fearless Mods, but we got some work that we got to do out here on the Subaru. So we've got the garage, got that green S13 sitting in here, taking up a lot of room with all of his pieces, parts, getting ready to put that engine in there. But first thing I want to do is wash the Subaru because a dirty car doesn't like to be worked on. Then we're going to bring it in here and maybe do a wheel bearing today, that one that's been pissed off ever since it was in that wreck. 4,000 miles ago, I've actually put 4,000 miles on the car, driving it as a daily, and it's doing well with that exception. The only things are same as last I reported: wheel bearing and the check engine light, because of the secondary air valves that we'll have to look into further. Alright guys, the car is clean and I've got a nice coffee, so time to give you the rundown. So as I said, I've put about 4,000 miles on this. It's approaching 10,700. I had 6,700 when we got it back last October. So approaching a year now of having the car. Big slowdown this summer while we left New Jersey and transitioned to Ohio and had to get set up in a garage here. So everything's set up now and we're ready to go ahead and continue working on it. In those 4,000 miles, we really got to noticing that front left wheel bearing that hit the tree really ended up not being happy in the long run. So I'm gonna go ahead and replace that first thing, and then maybe we'll go ahead and get into this trunk here and replace that right hinge, because this hinge over here is the one that is bent, which is not allowing anything to line up. It rubs a lot down here, and you can see the gap isn't quite right up here. It's a little elevated and stuff, so I'm hoping that's going to go ahead and bring it back to where it needs to be. Anyway, first thing, let's go ahead and get on that bearing. So instead of putting a cotter pin in it, they crimp it down so into the notch there, so we just got to get like a screwdriver in there and pry that back so that we can then pull the, that's actually the nut. That's crazy. Usually that's a keeper cap that goes over it and it gets crimped, but that's the actual piece of the nut, so that might be fun to get. Because that's part of the nut, it's going to have to be able to spin around this inner shaft. So I just used a pointed punch here and got in against it and, you know, kind of wedged in between there and let this, the actual hub shaft there, slide this down as I hammered to push that out. So now we'll see if we can get that to turn. Okay, so you can see when I took that off there, it actually worked just fine. But like I said, that obviously had to spin around on there because that is part of the, actually it's part of the threaded nut, which is just bizarre. Anyway, when we put it back on there, more than likely it will land in a different spot. We'll make sure it does, and we will punch that back in to that slot to keep it from backing off. For now, I'm going to go ahead and just spin it on there loosely. There we go. You gotta let go, man. There we go. Okay. Okay, being a noob on these brakes, I started to pull out one of these bolts. No, one of these bolts. These are obviously, that's the one I started to take out. In fact, you can see the paint chip. But these 4 bolts actually hold the 2 sides of the caliper, halves of the caliper together, and that would all be sealed hydraulically, and we don't want to mess that up. So that's when I decided to go deeper and get these bolts here, 1, 2, that were attached here and here. And those were the 19mm bolts. So now we've got our hub bolt off, and as you can see, there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts holding this in that we got to get from the backside. All right, so let's see if we can get the impact on those. Nothing. Get these other 2. Oh, that one might be a little challenging. Let's get a swivel joint on that one. And there's 4. Should just pull out. Oh man, that's too easy. Too easy. Not as dirty as the ones on the Titan that had gone, and nor does it feel as grindy. But, and I'm going to put a little bit of, well, it's nice having new stuff here. I'm going to wipe these out, and I'm going to put just a little bit of grease on these splines, just so that they're not rusting and stuff like that. There's not a lot of movement there, but that way they're not rusting up. Okay, so you've heard me talk about them before, but our friends in Libertyville, Illinois at Libertyville Subaru hooked us up with some discounts and some sponsorship on these parts. So we've got an OEM wheel bearing that we're going to put back in here. So please be sure and check those guys out. They give good deals. I've talked about them many times. Their website's phenomenal. You can look for anything you need on there by you put in the VIN and just tailor your search. And their prices, the more you get, the more you save, because really you're just paying shipping on top of already great discounts. So SubaruPartWholesale.com is where you go find that website and check out their parts. But so here we go with a brand new OEM wheel bearing. So we'll just give it a quick check, and it obviously checks out as the correct one. Like I said, a little bit of grease. Don't gotta get crazy because I'm not lubing anything really. I'll just put a light film around here to try to prevent rust. Like about a... So while I'm doing this, I'll tell you the story on the Titan. If you watched any of those videos, that last video I was replacing the front left wheel bearing hub like this, and it went bad again in just a few hundred miles. So those Moog parts must be the problem. Don't know what's up with that, but Rock Auto hooked us up, and we were able to send both of them back for a full refund. After that months-long ordeal of going through about 3 bearings per side, at least 2 and sometimes 3. So, and I still bought from Rock Auto, and went with SKF brand, so that I could try just something new, and replaced them both. So, didn't want to show you that and be repetitive, more than I already had been with the bearings on that thing. But anyway, they're in it now. and it seems to be working for now, so fingers crossed that all goes well. But because of that, I'm going to be very particular on here with the, I'm going to look up the torques for all these bolts and make sure that I torque everything down to spec, because I don't want to risk having any kind of those issues with this hub. Following what Sam Crack has recommended many times, the e-manuals online, I went on there and found a manual for 2015 Impreza WRX STi and downloaded that. It was 20 bucks, but it's a full service repair manual, which is kind of interesting to get at this particular juncture, considering how much work I've already done to the car up to this point. But it's very good. So here's an example for the the front hub unit bearing. So it shows them right there prying out the crimped piece of that nut that we started with. So a lot of good information here. Everything that we did exactly according to this, and I'm not always going to look into it before I jump into stuff. It's just a lot of it's just basic knowledge, but whenever it comes to certain things that might be a little more complex, or wiring diagrams when it comes to that secondary air valve, that's something I definitely want to do, is get down into that and see if I can chase some of those wires. Maybe something got crimped or cut or whatever when the tree came through here and destroyed the fuse box and some of these wiring harnesses. So I'll chase some of those wires, and that could be a really good resource, which is the main reason I wanted this. In the meantime, because I probably could have searched and found some of these torques, but in the meantime, pretty easy. So we've got the axle hub. Those 4 bolts will be 47.9, so 48 foot-pounds. The tightening torque for the disc brake assembly for the STi is 114 foot-pounds, as compared to the non-STi, which is 59 foot-pounds. I assume that's because of the Brimbos being different, but so yeah, 114 foot-pounds. And then the actual nut that goes in the middle here, the hub nut, 162.3 foot-pounds. And then lastly, for the wheels, 88.5 foot-pounds. So a lot of good information to get right there. So with that, we'll go ahead and get back to putting this back together. Not a big fan of torquing that with the swivel on there, but don't really have a choice on that one. Instructions here to install the brake assembly. That way we can hold the brake while we do this. Okay, so those 114.3. 160. 2.3. Here's how I'm going to do it as a singleton here. Push the brake. I've pushed the seat back, and then I'm just going to wedge it onto the seat like that. So that's holding the brake. Now let's get our 162.3. Brake was slipping a little bit, but there's our torque. And there we go. Bigger punch and bigger hammer. So you can see there how we've got that pinched in again. There's no way that nut's gonna back off of there. So we're ready to put the wheel on and call that a job complete. I'm gonna do what I always forget to do, and I'm gonna back the torque wrench all the way back down to 0. Because if you keep it all sprung up, especially up at 162, which is the top of the range, you're just going to destroy it. It'll mess up the calibration. So take all the tension off the spring. The torque wrench will remain accurate longer. And we'll just get those snug until we put it on the ground. And then, like I said, I believe those are, 88.5 foot-pounds. It's time to finally get the hinge. As you recall, when we replaced the quarter panel, it came with a hinge, so pretty certain that that one is good to go. And it did show us that the one that had been in the wreck was bent, and I have to assume that this one is also. So I've got a new hinge, and we're going to go ahead and remove the inner platform back there, and get to that hinge so that we can go ahead and remove that and replace this. Okay, so the difficult part with this is the springs underneath. It was a challenge when I did it on the ground before. I can only imagine it's going to be even more of a challenge now. The service manual might come in handy for that as well, to see how they're routed, because you can see that the springs here are not necessarily correctly installed, because this one keeps hopping out of the track and it's behind the bolt there and interferes with it. They were hard enough to put in when this was sitting on the ground previously, when we replaced this hinge. Now it's going to be challenging to try to replace this one with the spring load still in there. So we'll see. I'll look at the service manual and see how those are supposed to run, if there's a secret to it. In fact, I might even check that and see what it says for replacing the hinge. Okay, so I think I've figured out how not to do this. I was looking at online here at how the torsion bars are, which are really freaking confusing. And there's a special tool that you use to pry down on them and so that you can disengage them. Well, what I was really trying to do is figure out, like I was telling you, which direction those go in front of each other. And I noticed they were crisscross, so I figured I could try to pull them around each other. And in so doing, I actually sprung the whole damn thing while I was underneath here, and this came crashing down on my head and shoulders. So that was fun. Yeah, one person job, maybe not. And but hey, it's happened to others as well, so I don't feel too terrible about it. I'm just glad that everything's good. I've got the torsion bars out, and now I can go ahead and start putting in the new hinge. Okay, so first thing I got to do is put some grease in the pivot points here. Okay, so everything's just not even snugged, it's loose so that I can have some adjustment in there. Now, time for the fun part. Alright, so I guess on a new one of these, it would have some striping on here. There'll be 2 stripes on this side and only 1 on the other one. The other thing is they both look different. So this one curls back upon itself like this over here, This is the side that goes into the hinge. Okay, those are the same on both of them. But on this end of it, this one curls back on itself, whereas the other one, when it gets over to here, it just goes straight and stops. So you can identify them differently. I think this is the approved Subaru tool. Let's see if we get in here. And then go in here. Then the question comes, we pry this down with these. Okay, it's in there. That's in there. Holy crap, I got one. Keep in mind too, these are stronger springs because they're for the STi model with the big ass wing. So that's why these are even extra springy. So I think where I went wrong before is when I put this in over here, and then I try to go to that back slot right there. These crisscross in a weird way. They're overlapping each other, so that doesn't work. But I think if I come in over the top of it like that, and then slip it in there, and go for the back slot, it looks like once I twist that end to install it, like I might generate the clearance right there that I need. So that's what I'm going to try. Keep this on my, I thought I'd try to keep it on my right hand, maybe not. Get up in there. Okay, you're in there. Whoa, holy shit. Okay, there's the springiness. Maybe, okay, here we go. Maybe they do go back and forth like that. They don't appear to be hitting each other. I think we might have got it, folks. Just loose, but oh, that's looking good. That's looking good. So much better. Not rubbing here, got a good gap. Still got a little height on both sides. So obviously you need to do some adjusting. Got a lot of height here. First start just by tightening it down. You can see where the bolts were originally back here at the top of the hinge, so I'm going to tighten it down into those locations from the original hinge. So those are snug. Oh, it's so nice. I'm just going to snug these down. Well, and see what we got. I'm trying to move the latch downward and see if that pulls the trunk down further. So this side is obviously still has the damage where the trunk came over, and this is bubbled up, and I've got some work to do here. I got to pull this out, fix where the trunk came up here and hit, or the spoiler, and kind of pull that across. But after you pull that over along in here, this gap will be good. Coming down through here, it's looking pretty good. And the specs, there's a height and width here. There's a height and width here. And then there's a height here. Coming around this side, again, with our new quarter panel, there's a height and a width here. and there's a height and a width here. This is looking fantastic. And it dives in at the top anyways, naturally. The deck lid goes straight and the roofline starts to pull up away from it. So we're looking pretty sweet there. I feel like it could probably go down just a shade more, like down that way, because both of them are just slightly up, very slight. Here's what I was just describing. The up at the flat surface on top, you've got the width and the height between the two panels, and so that is down here. The width is 3.5 plus or minus 1 millimeter, and the surface level overlap is minus -0.5 millimeter to +1, and I feel like it might just be slightly outside that, slightly more than the +1. And then on those little rear pieces of the quarter panel, like I was telling you, you got the width is still again 3.5 plus or minus 1 millimeter, and the height is -0.5 to +0.7. I think we're doing pretty good there. And then the bottom gap to the plastic bumper surface there is 7.5 plus or minus 1 millimeter. So that could be 8.5 millimeters, which is 0.3 inch. So it's more than a 1/4 inch gap. Those gaps up top aren't too bad. You can see a little positive overlap there, but that's not too bad. And then same thing on that side, just a little positive overlap, so that's not too bad. So the moral of the story here is with hinges, when it comes to hinges, just get the new hinges if it's had any kind of wreck and damage to them. Okay, so the thing seems to be lined up real good. Now we're going to go ahead and patch together the inside. Alright guys, so that's going to be a wrap for this week. I hope you're glad to have us back. I know it's good to be back on the video waves here, and hopefully we can keep putting out some more stuff. I know the next plan is to hopefully come at you with something tomorrow, the surprise I spoke about earlier a few episodes back. But anyways, go ahead and please, if you like these videos, if you like what we're doing with the STi, even though it's slow, we'll get there eventually. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.